Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they have made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Entrepreneur Gene. I am thrilled to be with my guest today. He is so savvy about information security and risk management, but that's not the only thing that makes my guest interesting. He sits on the board of directors for various companies that are mostly cyber related, but there's some passion projects that he is also very much interested in, and I'm sure we're going to hear about that today. He's also the co-owner of Lifesaver Pool Fence, which is a very mission-driven thing, of Tampa, very, very important. And he is the co-founder and president of Confide. Larry Whiteside Jr., welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Let's dive into the main question of the show. Is there an entrepreneur gene? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so I used to not think there was. I used to truly believe that, people just made a choice. But over my career, having done all the things I've done to end up as an entrepreneur and to think back how many times people have told me I should go be an entrepreneur, kind of makes me think a little differently, right? It kind of makes me think that there are characteristics that people have that lead others to say, you should be an entrepreneur because entrepreneurs are seen a certain way, they act a certain way, they behave a certain way, they engage a certain way. And so when I think back on me over my career, the successes and the failures, right, it leads me to now say, and the fact that I am an entrepreneur, that I realize this has been a burning passion the entire time. And I do think that there may be some truth to that.
There may be. Let's explore a little bit more. When you think about those behaviors or attributes of entrepreneurs that you recognized in other people, what were those things?
It was really, there were multiple aspects, right? So one was just being outgoing, right? As an entrepreneur, it's impossible for you to sit still and just be. You are actively engaged, you are out communicating, you are out challenging. And even if that's something that tires you out, ultimately where you have to go re-energize and then go do it again, it's something that you just find yourself doing over and over and over, right? And so then it's also the communicating. Every successful entrepreneur I know has this ability to communicate and storytell unlike their peers, right? Where they are exceptional storytellers. They can get out in front of people and tell stories in ways that just, right, engulf and grasp and draw the people that they're speaking to in. And it's those types of things that I've recognized across the entrepreneurs I've met over my career and I've, become friends with.
What was the hesitation maybe about yourself? What was it that you didn't necessarily embrace about that identity?
Honestly, it was fear, like just in full transparency mode, right? It was fear. It was entrepreneurship. I know is hard. Everybody I've known over my career who's been an entrepreneur talks about how hard it is. And there's a level of comfort that you have in, having a W-2 job where the money is coming. As long as you don't flub it up, right? The check is going to be there every 2 weeks or whatever your frequency is of pay. It's going to show up. And you have to mess it up in order to lose or choose to leave. But you don't have to, and I've heard this said by many entrepreneurs that, right, getting the job, right, is the hardest thing. And that's where you spend 90% of your time is getting clients, getting business, getting that. And then you will spend 10% of your time doing work. But then while you're doing work, you still have that other 90% that you still have to do to go get the next thing. So getting the one doesn't stop or preclude you from having to continuously do that. And it's that aspect of the grind that a lot of them call it. But I will tell you, and I will share very openly, and my wife has heard me say this, if it were not for her, if I had not married this woman, I would not have gone on this journey. Because what I realized, again, in knowing all the people I know that do this, I realized that there's a big component of operations that you have to have and build into your business. And being a cyber executive, being in information security and stuff for so long, I understand operations. I understand all of the components of operations in cyber. But when you talk about the operations of building and running a business, though I knew it from an ancillary risk management standpoint and the systems and things to have to build them myself, it's a whole other story. And so the fact that my wife has been an entrepreneur for 12 years and she does this herself, and her being my biggest champion, it sort of empowered me to sort of take this leap.
She saw that about you. She saw that spark that you wanted but had the fear, and she encouraged you. That's amazing. A lot of spouses fear it too. They fear the wallet changes in the wallet and changes in the bank account. And that's legit, right? It's legit. I mean, it's a good fear to have, right? Just to say, hey, we got to manage everything. How the hell are we going to do this? But it sounded like you guys worked it out, which is pretty amazing. And kudos to her. Should we give her a little plug? Should we say her name?
Of course. Yep, Shannon Whiteside. She is my life partner and business partner and partner amongst many, many things.
Yes, and I've had the opportunity to talk to her, and she is fabulous. So kudos to the two of you for figuring that out and then taking it forward. If you were going to teach entrepreneurship, how would you do that? What would you teach?
Yeah, if I were to teach entrepreneurship, the first thing I would do is I would teach people to find their passion. The one thing that I've seen amongst people who were successful versus not successful is entrepreneurs who followed their passion, right, became more successful than those who were literally just doing it because they thought it was the hot trend right now. Because it's a grind. And at some point, you are going to feel burnt out. At some point, you're going to feel overworked. At some point, you are going to feel overdrawn, that you're being pulled in too many directions, right? And the reality is, it is passion that keeps the fire going. It is passion that keeps the drive going. It is passion that re-energizes you and keeps you pushing forward through the down times in business, through the tough times with tough clients and all of those things. It's that passion that will continue to drive you forward. So for me, it would be teaching people to find and align to their passion versus chasing the dollar.
I'm trying to envision the title of that course. Maybe that's the title. Find your passion. Don't just chase the dollar.
Yeah.
Could be a podcast too. You never know.
Could be.
When it comes to challenges, entrepreneurs face many challenges, and you've articulated a few of those already. Which are the ones that are keeping you up at night?
Yeah, for me, honestly, it's a combination. So I'm really, really new, right? I announced this at the beginning of January, coming into 2025 with a bang, right? For me, it's a combination of having an expectation for growth, but recognizing the importance of the back-end systems to enable it, right? So as an early stage entrepreneur, and like many of the companies I advise in the early stage cyber realm, everybody wants to run fast. Let's get some business, let's get some business. And that's great. And yes, we need to make money. And if we move too fast, too soon, without having the operational pieces in place, right? And again, don't try to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to have something that is going to help you not actually fumble or drop the ball, right? Because there's nothing worse than potentially getting a client and promising to follow through on some things, but because you don't have the systems in place to track, monitor, remind you of what you need to do as the follow-ons for those clients, you could easily find yourself in harm's way because now the client that you were banking on is not trusting you. You haven't delivered on what you promised you were going to, and now you don't have that referral that you were hoping to then build the next portion of your business. So I tell everybody, if you focus on the operational components that you need as an individual for your business, right, that you need, everybody doesn't need the same operational things in the early stages. You're going to have to figure out where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. And so going into this, the business partners that I have, we were very clear, each of us, we called it out in our first strategy meeting, like, where are your weaknesses? And I called out mine and I said, I need these things in place because this is where I'm going to drop the ball. I know who I am. I recognize it. So as long as I've got this, then we'll be good. And that's helped. And it's that open conversation with yourself and or with your business partners if you have them.
How many business partners do you have?
So I've got another co-founder and then sort of a back end and silent investor that's sort of helping us. He's been very successful with multiple companies. And so he's sort of the guy in the background that's tapping on both of our shoulders and sort of like a coach for us. And it's a really great way to start a company, especially when you've been fearful of doing it, to be able to go out into the market, align to a passion that you believe in an industry that you love and has supported you for a long time, and with a partner that you trust, right, blindly, because we've been friends for a long time, with a coach on the back end.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful combo. Is this your first startup?
This is this is the first startup I've found it. And I'll say it like this. Yes and no, because I did sort of co-found a not-for-profit. Now, co-founding a not-for-profit, I took a breath for a reason. It's an entirely different world, right? So running a not-for-profit, funding, licensing, going through all of the things associated with building a not-for-profit is literally such a tough thing because most not-for-profits, to their title, not-for-profit, the art of raising money for a not-for-profit is very, very challenging. And so with that, right, because it's so challenging, I think that sort of prepared me for this, because I helped to co-found an organization. It's now called Cybersecurity, and it's geared at increasing diversity in cyber, right? So me and four of the guys saw a challenge in cyber that there were not enough diverse people and people of color and women in the industry as we traveled around the country and around the globe at conferences, speaking on a number of different things, that said, hey, let's do something about it. Now, I didn't look at that as a startup until I stepped into the president's role, right? When at first I was just on the board and I could advise and, hey, here's some tactics we can do and here's some strategies. Great, go execute. But then when the organization hit a pivot point and I stepped in to take over for 3.5, almost 4 years, that's when I was like, oh boy, like this is a thing. Like this is running a business is a thing, and running a not-for-profit is a real thing. And so I had to change our model of how we raise funds, and like it just became a real thing. And by the grace of God, I literally survived through the pandemic, right? And into the end of 2023. And it's still running. I stepped down at the end of 2023, and now I've got a wonderful gentleman, MK Palmore, who's running it now, and it's been very successful and still growing. So that was kind of my first startup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a startup. You created it from scratch and it's an entity. Yeah, it's a nonprofit entity, but it's an entity.
Right.
And there's a legacy that you are vested in that you want to see continue.
Sure.
And you have a succession story with that, which is pretty amazing that you've hired an executive director to take it to the next level so that you can step back and admire the work from afar. Yeah, it enables you to do other things. And I want to learn more about what you are doing today and learn more about your company. I want to talk about the future. There's so much to unpack when it comes to information security and risk management. It's a very interesting space. Tell me about what excites you in the future of this industry.
Yeah. So for me, the thing that I'm getting excited about is the automation. So I'm old enough to remember when in cybersecurity, any aspect of automation was frowned upon and feared, right? People didn't want any automation to touch or do anything because they were fearful that a machine was going to make a mistake and then cause more problems than what it was solving, right? And we've jumped that shark, we've surpassed the fear, and we're in the age of AI is giving us a capability for self-learning and for technology to be able to, I don't want to say supplant a human, but allow humans to focus on more difficult problems versus the mundane task. And that's where in cybersecurity it had gotten and continues today, but is lessening as a difficulty, where the mundane task related to cyber are very painful, and they're hard to hire for. It's hard to have enough people to find a needle in a haystack. So when you can utilize technology to automate things to help find a needle in a haystack. So now instead of, I put it in terms of size of data. If I've got a petabyte or multiple petabytes of data that I need to sift through and a human has to do it via a command line and scripts and using the keyboard versus having a computer do it and get it down to maybe a terabyte or maybe a megabyte of data that a human then needs to go look at more closely, that's a vastly different problem. And it's way, way more efficient for us or for organizations and for cyber executives who are trying to solve complex problems.
It's overwhelming. I'm still trying to get my head around the data. Use petadata?
Petabyte. Right. That's right.
Petabyte. I can't even get my head around that. How am I going to get my head around anything else that we're talking about here? Right. It's very complex, very significant. Yeah. How many football fields would we fill with servers on that?
It's quite a bit, right? To think that at one point early in my career that I had a 40 megabyte hard drive and was like, I don't know how I'm ever going to fill this thing up. And the fact that in that 30-year span, we've gone from a megabyte, which was brand new, to now petabytes. Like that, it's truly amazing at the speed of technology and where we're at. And with the new chip that Microsoft just announced for quantum, like the future is here.
If you love the insights on this show, you'll love the insights I share in my book, written for entrepreneurs like you who are building with your exit in mind. Take the next step in your business journey to make your business more scalable and valuable. Head on over to btsherpa.com/book to grab your free digital copy of the Business Transition Handbook. Or you can also click the link in the show notes, btsherpa.com/book. The future is now.
Yes.
And you're essentially creating algorithms or software that would plug into larger systems. What's the business model? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm actually helping cyber executives be better. So let me give you an analogy. So have you ever seen someone get sprayed with a water hose?
Yeah.
Right? So now turn that water hose into a fire hose. For cyber executives, that's the amount of information being thrown at them from the cybersecurity market as it relates to new technologies and new services, right? That's how much is being generated, how much content, marketing, messaging, emails, LinkedIn posts, Instagram posts, social media in general is getting thrown at every cyber executive. So as a cyber executive, sifting through that to try and figure out what's going to help you solve a problem is an absolutely monstrous task, but they're charged with serving their organization and making their organization more secure. So when you think about those two things, it's almost impossible for them to focus on their job while also trying to find technologies and services that are going to help them solve problems to mitigate risk in the job. And so I created this company specifically because I want to be the wall that stops the fire hose. I want to help executives be better at what they're doing and let me and my team go out into the market. We've got eyes and ears all over the market from investors and venture capital and private equity and other executives that are sharing information with us. So we know what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. And we can then help cyber executives be better and say, hey, here's a couple of options that you should look at. And here's how we came to that. So now instead of them taking days, weeks, months to try and find it, they go to us. They don't have to spend that additional time doing it. They come to us and literally we find it for them. We bring them two options. So at the end of the day, they're still getting to choose, right? We give them the criteria with which we chose those two options. So they're transparent on that. And then we're also transparent on our margins and or markup of the software for them to buy, right?
So you're in a way, you're a matchmaker, but then you're also a value-added reseller if you're adding on additional services or stitching to get the products together. Is that a fair analogy?
Yep, that's it. That's like I'm a matchmaker. I love that, actually.
You're a matchmaker. Yeah, I'm thinking about Capterra. I don't know if that's a good example for all our SaaS products out there. There's sites like Capterra that are like, okay, what are you trying to do? And hey, here's the ones we recommend. It's really tricky when you're saying about cyber, because if there's constantly new products or even ones that are just on the, startup radar, they're not yet first, maybe they need early adopters too. So that could be another factor. Some companies I've been a part of absolutely positively did not want to be an early adopter. They wanted to be kind of a fast follower. And so that can also influence choices of, well, is this a more well-established product or is it a new product? And, what niches, it's very complicated. And not only is all of the technologies keep coming at us fast and furious, but the bad guys are getting better and better and better at this every day. And so it's like this double-sided whammy of, hey, we got to be putting up our defense, and their offense is getting better. My goodness, this is a tough industry. Why are you doing this again?
Well,
Man.
So I tell people this, there's a reason I'm in cyber, right? And so, and it ties to diversity. So cyber, for me, information security is tied to a mindset of risk. So my wife and I have this conversation on a regular basis. So you're married. When you walk down the street or in a parking lot, right? Which side of the street do you walk on, or which side of the parking lot are you on? Are you on the car side, right, or the street side? Are you on the grass side or the street side, right? So for my wife, right, because of my mindset and how I think, I'm always thinking risk, and I'm always paying attention to risk. So for me, I always have her walk on the side of the cars in the parking lot or on the grass side of the sidewalk. And I do that because for me, I'm thinking risk, I'm thinking forward all the time. I do the same thing in cyber. When it comes to cyber, right, I'm always thinking, yes, we're doing this thing, but what are the things that could happen from a technological standpoint if we allowed this data to do this? If we allowed employees to connect in this way, right? So this what if is always happening. And part of it for me is because of how I was raised, right? How I was raised, the areas I grew up in, right? Between gangs and different things and fighting and all this, I had a risk management mindset. I just always have. And so when I found cyber, or cyber found me, however you want to say it, it just fit and it aligned for me. And so that's why for me, I tell people, I say it this way. I think God built me on purpose for a purpose. And that is to help people in this industry that I really just align to and love so much.
You ever read the book Ferdinand the Bull? That's what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of you and Ferdinand the Bull. Like, he's a protector, right?
Yep.
In that story, and big guy, but the heart of gold.
Yep.
My husband has some similarities here. He's not a CISO or a risk manager, but man, is he wired to protect. So I think that's a really good gene to have. In addition to the entrepreneur gene, there's the safety gene, risk management gene. You definitely have it. As we learn more about you, which I'm excited to learn more about you, Larry, I'm so curious about how you got into, you kind of gave us a little teaser there about steps in your background that led you to this path. I'd love to hear more about that origin story.
Yeah. So my origin story is very unique because, a lot of people say they fell into something. And honestly, for me, I fell into this, right? So I graduated college and I couldn't find a job, right? I was looking for a job. Now, my grandfather, who, God rest his soul, was a Tuskegee Airman. And he told me, he said, hey, baby Larry, so I'm a junior. He said, go be a pilot because that tech thing, that's going to go away, but we're going to always need pilots. And in good grandson fashion, I was like, yeah, okay, grandpa. But he stayed in my ear. So I was like, fine. So to get him off my back, I went and talked with a military recruiter. Well, in speaking with the military recruiter, I found out that there were tech jobs in the military. And I was like, oh, well, okay, well, maybe this is something that I can do. And so I went to officer training school and got my commission and joined the military. And in joining the military, I got a role where I was responsible for technology, but they were introducing this thing called defense in depth, meaning have multiple layers of defense, right? So like, at your house, you have a front door, right? Or maybe you have a fence and there's a gate at the fence. And then from the gate at the fence, you got to get to the front door. And then from the front door, you got to get into the bedroom. And from the bedroom, you got to get into, your jewelry. Like there's multiple layers before someone can get to your crown jewels. And so that resonated with me. I was like, oh. And so I'm sort of got thrown into this tech and then information and network security space that I just truly, truly loved. And it became sort of a passion for me.
That's incredible. And your grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. That's
It
amazing.
was. It's a very interesting story because my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a Tuskegee Airman, and they talk about things being generational. So my grandfather being a Tuskegee Airman, theoretically, you would, and my grandmother being an RN, theoretically, they would set their kids up for success. Well, yeah, not so much. Um, my my oldest uncle became a pilot in the military, but then he was seen as the do-gooder, the good, right? And so the then younger two sons, of which my dad was the younger one, so the middle son and my father both just became not that.
So the entrepreneur gene is not necessarily in the family.
No, there is honestly there is no one in my entire family who has gone out to do this type of thing. Now, I'm gonna put a little caveat in here. So there's a way that you might be able to say my dad had an entrepreneur gene because he sold drugs.
Well,
I don't know if that really counts.
well,
Right.
no, I think we'll say he was a salesman.
Right. So, but yeah, so he was, but from a personality standpoint, he had a big personality. He was out, he was engaging, he was right. So that is where I got my personality from, of that, just the big personality and always engaging with people, always trying to help people, always trying to being out there, right? And so I did get that naturally, but starting a business there's no one in my family that's ever done that. And so it's been interesting, but for me, part of this is also setting new generational expectations, right? So for me, recognize. So do you think of how society? We've been educated societally in the U.S. It's been to go to school, graduate high school, go to college, graduate college. If the work that you plan to do requires an advanced degree, go get that advanced degree and then go into your field of career, right? Like that's what we've been taught. And so those who go to build things, those who go to start things they tend to be thought of as like, oh, like you're going off the beaten path and you're going like you guys are the innovators, and the reality is, I think that should be more the norm. There are people who are built to just be employees, and that's okay. But there are also people who are theoretically have all the components to be entrepreneurs. They just don't know how. And so I'm trying to, for me, with my children, trying to instill the mindset because I know it's possible for them. And I want to instill the mindset. Not to say if they aren't entrepreneurs, I'll be upset, but I want them to at least think that that's something that's possible for them. Because the one thing that my mother instilled in me is I can do anything despite my circumstances. There is nothing I can't do if I want to do it. So when I decided to do this, I actually changed the way I engage with my two youngest kids who are still in the house, right? So for them, there's no more allowance, and that it's like, if you want to earn money, come up with a service that I would pay for, and then I'll pay for it, right? And I gave some ideas, and they didn't want to do those. I was like, well, so come up with one. And every now and then they'll say, "Can we wash your car for X amount of money?" Oh, okay, sure. The car's dirty, right? But if I just went to the car wash, nope, I went to the car wash. I've already done that.
Yeah, you're actually imparting some entrepreneurial ethos, if I could say it that way, to them about finding market opportunity, creating a price that someone's willing to pay for and the value of the service. That's going to serve them well, whether they choose to have their own business one day or not. And I think between you and your wife, you're both setting some examples where the entrepreneurial gene is going to maybe run deep. Maybe in 10 years, you come back on the show and you tell me about your kids
I'd love to.
and what they decided to do. You never know.
Yep.
You never know. Um, You're very thoughtful, and you think about things, and we've been talking about the past. So this question is about going back in time. If you could give yourself some advice, go back in time. At what point in that time would you give yourself some entrepreneurial advice, tap yourself on the shoulder and say, hey, Larry, here's some things. What would that be? And when would that be?
Yeah, so for me, it would have probably been when I first got out of the military. Um, it was really just about trusting myself, right? I jumped at the first thing I could, and not that it didn't serve me well, not that it wasn't great experience, not that I didn't make some great friendships, but had I trusted myself more earlier in my career, at this point, I'd be further along, right? I would have probably taken this step earlier. There's a number of things that I may have done different now. I'm glad where I am where I am simply because of the outcome that I've gotten to. I'm extremely happy. But I would told myself to trust myself more because it's self-doubt is so easy. And it doesn't matter. A lot of people look at me and they're like, wait, what? How could you? I'm like, listen, it doesn't matter how many stages you see me on. It doesn't matter how big the crowd is you see me speaking in front of. I deal with and dealt with imposter syndrome. I've dealt with and dealt with anxiety associated with going on stage and doing these things. And I've not trusted myself in decisions that I'm about to make. And I shrink back in and I'm like, nope, you're not good enough to do that. Nope, you don't deserve that. Nope, you don't deserve that raise. You shouldn't ask for more money. You should, right? So I'd go back to then and just say, trust yourself more because I would have negotiated some salaries differently. I would have gotten, severance packages that were better. I would have gotten, protection packages and all sorts of things in different roles that I had that I would have done differently.
Yeah, I could see that. And it's difficult to put ourselves back in time and think, oh, but it's also healthy, especially as we're doing the tough work of entrepreneurship and trying to figure a lot of stuff out, to say, okay, let's take a break. Let's do a hindsight and learn from that and move forward. You talked a lot about purpose, and you talked about purpose inside the business and outside the business. A lot of times when I talk to folks, they might not have that well shaped, and they might have divergent purpose. It seems to me, Larry, that yours is very much intersected. How do you think about it?
Yeah. So for me, so number one, I'm a faith-based guy, right? And so for me, when it comes to purpose, purpose is derived from helping, right? And so when I say purpose and I say helping is the building block of that, I then say, okay, if I want to just help at my core, where are areas that I can help that I have value, right? And so then when I think about where my value lies, it's in the industry that I've served for 33 years, right? It is in this space where I've created a good career, I've created a good life for my family, and I've done a number of things that other people espouse to me, how they look up to me, or they want to mimic the career I've had. And so for me, I always go back to helping being the foundational block of everything. Then where do I add value? And all of that is wrapped in my spiritual belief and faith of just those things aligned to how he wants everybody to act.
That makes sense. You have a couple of businesses. One I mentioned in the introduction, where it's protecting pools. You live in Tampa. There's a lot of pools. Can you talk about having a portfolio of things and what impact that has on your view of your purpose?
Yeah. So again, right, if you think about the businesses we have, so right, so Shannon has a business as a fractional COO, helping small and medium sized businesses, right, become efficient, revenue profitable, all of that stuff, right? Together, we have a pool fence business that is helping families, right? Because childhood drowning is the number one cause of drowning for kids. Well, let me restate that. Death of kids under the age of 5 in the United States, the number one cause is drowning. Number one, right? And kids under the age of 5, number one is drowning. Florida is number one in the state. So with that, right, for us, it aligns to our purpose of helping in community. I'm a huge community proponent, and that's both in cyber and in our businesses. So that's where that comes in. We then have a fencing company, right? So we've got the pool fence, but then also the fencing company, right? That again is to help protect families' homes, right? Because putting a fence around your home reduces the chance of burglary, right? By a certain percentage. So then you take the fencing and now you go into my business at Confide. In Confide, I've got the cybersecurity community, right? That is, I am trying to help people in the community be better and not fall prey to the market that exists today, right? And so for me, everything centers around help because helping is doing good, right? So when you do things that are self-serving, right? I think that you're putting the wrong energy out into the world in general. I think helping when people recognize and they see the character of who you are and it's focused on helping, all the good things that you pray for, all the good things that you hope for are always ultimately going to come back. Sometimes it's going to come back directly, sometimes it's going to come back indirectly. But I do believe in what you put out is the thing that you get back. Life is a boomerang.
I believe that too. It's a notion of a universal magnet,
Ooh.
universal boomerang, right? So either one of those concepts where putting something out is drawing back. And do you remember Mr. Rogers? Did you ever watch Mr. Rogers? Okay, so I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mr. Rogers was a lifelong Pittsburgher. He's no longer with us, as you might know, but his show lives on and his spirit lives on. And one of his famous quotes was, "Find the helpers."
Yep.
So you are, Larry, through and through one of the helpers. It's been beautiful talking with you today. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are going to want to get in touch and learn more about what you do, especially if they live in Florida and they want to protect their property and their pool. And then business owners who want to learn more about the cybersecurity services, of course. What's a good way for them to find you?
Yes, I'm easy to reach on LinkedIn. That's literally the easiest way to find me. But because LinkedIn gets noisy, you can actually reach out to me via email. I am fine at giving my email address out. It's pretty simple. Larry@confide.group.
And we will put that in the show notes. Larry, thank you so much for joining me on the Entrepreneur Gene. It has been a joy to be with you today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you. We appreciate you. And if you've enjoyed this show, why not follow it, subscribe, share it with a friend, tell everybody how much you've enjoyed it. And we'd love to hear from you too. Tell us what you enjoyed about it. Find us on LinkedIn and let us know. And of course, if you want to see this video, you'll be watching it on our YouTube channel, which is the Business Transition Sherpa YouTube channel. Well, you'll also see our sister show called Succession Stories. So this has been another fine episode of the Entrepreneur Gene, and we will see you next time. Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support the Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.